The desert has always been the crucible of the king. Long before he wore a crown of gold, David learned the harsh, unforgiving lessons of survival in the crags and caves of the Judean wilderness. Now, decades later, the shepherd king has returned to the dust. Driven from his magnificent palace of cedar by the treason of his own flesh and blood, David crosses the Jordan River and makes his camp in the walled city of Mahanaim. He is weary, his heart is broken, and his feet are bruised, but the fires of his youth are not yet entirely extinguished. While Absalom sits in Jerusalem, playing at being king, surrounded by flatterers and the stolen comforts of his father's throne, the harsh reality of war is beginning to mobilize in the east. David is not alone in the wilderness. The men who followed him into exile are not soft palace courtiers. They are the hardened veterans of 100 brutal campaigns. They are the mighty men, the legendary warriors who once broke through enemy lines just to fetch their commander a drink of water. Under the grim, unyielding command of Joab, Abishai, and Ittai the Gittite, this ragtag army of loyalists begins to organize. They sharpen their bronze, they string their bows, and they prepare to do what they have always done: fight for the anointed of God. The contrast is as stark as light and darkness. Absalom has numbers. He has mobilized the vast glittering army of the 12 tribes of Israel. But David has the wolves. The rebels are marching to a coronation, completely unaware that the men waiting for them in the shadows of the forest are marching to an execution. The final clash is no longer a political dispute. It is a reckoning of blood, set against the desolate, sweeping backdrop of the ancient wilderness. As the dawn of the battle breaks, the air is thick with the metallic scent of tension and the heavy thud of marching boots. King David stands by the massive stone gates of Mahanaim, watching his army file out into the morning mist. His original instinct, the instinct of the lion slayer, is to draw his own sword and march at the head of the column. He tells his generals, "I will surely go out with you myself." But the army absolutely refuses. They know the brutal mathematics of this war. "You shall not go out," they reply with fierce loyalty. "If half of us die, they will not care. But you are worth 10,000 of us." Forced to remain behind the safety of the walls, David takes his place beside the gate. As the three grim commanders, Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, march past him to take their positions, the king issues his final, desperate command. It is not a brilliant tactical maneuver. It is not a rousing speech of victory. It is the agonizing, heartbreaking plea of a shattered father. In the hearing of all the troops, David's voice cracks as he issues an impossible order. "Deal gently, for my sake, with the young man, with Absalom." A heavy, suffocating silence falls over the departing ranks. The soldiers exchange dark, knowing glances. Joab, the cold-blooded architect of Uriah's death, stares at his king with eyes like flint. Joab understands the brutal reality of the world in a way David no longer can. You cannot deal gently with treason. You cannot negotiate with a cancer that is trying to consume the throne. The army marches out into the valley, carrying the king's desperate plea in their ears, but carrying the heavy, unspoken burden of absolute violence in their hearts. The two armies finally collide, not on a flat, open plain, but in the dark, twisted, and treacherous depths of the wood of Ephraim. It is a terrifying, claustrophobic battlefield. The ancient forest is a chaotic labyrinth of massive oaks, tangled thickets, concealed ravines, and jagged rocks. When Absalom's massive, inexperienced army marches into the trees, their overwhelming numerical advantage instantly evaporates. They cannot form shield walls. They cannot coordinate sweeping chariot charges. They are swallowed by the shadows. And waiting in those shadows are David's veterans. The fighting is not a grand, glorious clash of armies. It is a vicious, fragmented slaughter. The loyalists strike like phantoms from the underbrush, utilizing the brutal, close-quarters combat they perfected in the caves of Adullam. The scripture records a terrifying detail about this day. The forest devoured more people that day than the sword. Absalom's men, panicked and disorganized, are pushed backward into the deadly terrain. They fall blindly into hidden pits. They are crushed by stampeding panic, and they are slaughtered in the choking grip of the thorns. 20,000 men of Israel fall in the twisted roots and blood-soaked dirt of the wood of Ephraim. The rebellion, built on smiles and stolen charisma in the safety of the city gates, completely shatters upon the immovable rock of David's hardened warriors. The forest echoes with the horrific sounds of an army being dismantled piece by piece. The Golden Prince's dream of an easy victory has turned into a sprawling, suffocating nightmare, and the trap is slowly closing around the traitor himself. In the midst of the total collapse of his forces, Absalom realizes all is lost. The handsome prince, desperate to escape the slaughter, spurs his royal mule through the thick, chaotic underbrush. But the very vanity that made him a god among the people becomes the instrument of his doom. As his mule plunges blindly beneath the thick, low-hanging boughs of a massive, ancient oak tree, Absalom's legendary, heavy hair, the crowning glory of his perfect physical appearance, becomes violently entangled in the twisting branches. The panicked mule does not stop. It keeps running, leaving the Golden Prince of Israel suspended between heaven and earth, hanging helplessly in the air. He is trapped, isolated, and entirely defenseless. A loyalist soldier spots the hanging rebel, but remembers the king's tearful command at the gate. He refuses to strike the blow. But when the news reaches Joab, there is no such hesitation. Joab does not care about the tears of a father. He cares about the survival of the kingdom. Joab grabs 3 heavy darts, short, brutal spears designed for close-range killing, and rides furiously to the great oak. He finds Absalom dangling in the shadows, still alive, struggling against the branches. Without a single word of monologue, without a second of hesitation, Joab drives all 3 darts violently into the heart of Absalom. The prince's 10 armor-bearers close in and finish the grim task, striking the traitor down. Joab instantly raises his silver trumpet to his lips and blows a piercing, triumphant blast. The battle is over. The rebellion is dead. They take the beautiful, broken body of the king's son, throw it unceremoniously into a deep pit in the forest, and pile a massive heap of stones over it. It is a monument not to a king, but to a curse. Miles away, completely blind to the carnage of the forest, King David sits between the 2 massive stone gates of Mahanaim, waiting. The watchman on the high wall calls down. A runner is coming, alone. Then, another runner. The first to arrive is Ahimaaz, breathless and exhausted. He falls to the earth before the king and shouts, "All is well. The Lord your God has delivered up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." It is the news of absolute victory. The throne is secure. The kingdom is saved. But David does not ask about the army. He does not ask about the casualties. He leans forward, his voice trembling with a singular, desperate obsession. "Is it well with the young man Absalom?" Ahimaaz evades the question, but the second runner, a Cushite, arrives moments later. David asks him the exact same question. The Cushite lowers his eyes and delivers the devastating, fatal blow. "May the enemies of my lord the king, and all who rise up against you for evil, be like that young man." The victory instantly turns to ashes in David's mouth. The king does not celebrate. He does not thank his generals. He rises to his feet, trembling, and begins to climb the stone stairs to the chamber over the gate. As he walks, the facade of the mighty monarch completely shatters, and the agonizing, raw wail of a broken father echoes down the walls. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. Would I had died instead of you, O Absalom, my son, my son." The army that fought and bled to save his life returns to the city in absolute silence, stealing in like thieves, ashamed of their own victory. The rebellion has been crushed, the crown has been preserved. But as the king's weeping echoes across the wilderness, it is agonizingly clear that the man after God's own heart has lost everything that truly mattered.